Then we're going to have Gary. Then once we've finished with Gary, and I'm not sure how long that will take, we're going to have to play it by ear. Then you can continue with this if we've still got time and field questions with these guys. There are going to be 2 shifts going on the boat trip. Yeah?
Sorry, since I spoke to you, there's been an update because of the winds we've got. We can't go on the boat trip. You know, they say it's not safe because it's a flot.
Yeah.
So, but what we can go to the restaurant and there will be cheese and wine there at 5. So sorry, John.
The wind goes
I
down.
was too. It's definitely something, but I just got the text message about 15 minutes ago. Well, I can follow that up with him.
Could we do it at lunchtime tomorrow?
So guys, it looks like there won't be a boat trip, which means that when Gary finishes, you can all stay as long as you like.
There would be cheese and wine as
Debate.
well. There would be cheese and wine
There
as
will
well.
be cheese and wine for those of us who don't want to stay. Just
I want to show Bond's video.
Leon wants to show a couple of videos. Some of you seem to want to debate the political party stuff. You're welcome to stay. I will hand the key to the last person who's going to leave. I will be finding a lift. Go and drink wine by the river. So I'm going to play it by ear. Charles?
If we're not going on the boat trip, I've got some interesting movies here with me.
That same one you showed us.
Well, there's V for Vendetta, but there's Unthinkable and a few others. If anybody's interested in the movie.
Okay, well, if you want to watch a movie, you can speak to Trevor. Leon's got 2 shorts from the Fremont Foundation he wants to show. Cartoon type thingies. So once Gary's finished, you're on your own.
Oh, so you're not going to use it?
I can't get mine connected, so
I will
I'm
stop
gonna
being
use
generous.
Is there any chance of the boat trip at lunchtime tomorrow or after lunchtime tomorrow? I know people will be wanting to leave.
Probably it's going off.
It is Sunday for Orania, so that might be.
The whole point of the boat trip is meant to be a sunset boat trip. You go to a little island and have your drinks and your wine and your cheese. I'm afraid it's just sad.
But I'm not sure if we can ask Orania to.
No, they won't do it tomorrow. And anyway, midday would be intolerable.
Yeah.
The wind always dies away in the evening, by the way.
Do you reckon you just get the screen going?
I think as soon as he's plugged, we can come up. I see. There's 2 or 3 technical people down there already.
2 or 3.
Yeah.
Is that machine still on? Sounds very quiet.
It's generally F4 or function F4 that'll switch it to the.
I think it switched itself from the beginning.
Be careful if you. It'll take 5 minutes to repeat if you
I don't want to
turn it
and all the lights are off. It's off.
Did somebody switch it off?
I don't know if this makes it. Wouldn't make a difference from this.
Is it in there?
There's the power for that is in that corner there.
Oh, does someone put this?
Yeah, I think it's been unplugged now.
Oh, yeah, that's all.
Well, Jack's time is going.
if we're not going on the boat, if we're not going on the boat, would it be possible for me to maybe go a little bit into Gary's time and then Gary could
No, I'm not going for Gary. You can start and continue on.
Should I go after Gary then?
Well,
To do what?
we've got 10 minutes now, so Charles, you can come and take debate if you like. If Jack
Don't
wants to wait.
but don't kill it.
Yeah,
Any further questions? Yes.
Jack, you go after.
Okay, so I would say on
the wind, if it comes down, they
No, we'll get it. We'll get it.
Okay, yeah, I
Considering
wanted to
how it's
say,
flowing
we had a
and
very clear
previous
vision as to
experience
what we
there,
wanted
I
to
think he's
do.
gonna
And that's
start
kind of
if he
far
does
in
do
terms
it,
of
we'll go.
actual administration.
Yes.
But really, like, I think our purpose is to find one guy we can put in parliament who
Yes.
can just consistently say, guys, what you're discussing here, X, Y, Z are going to be the obvious economic side effects that you are not discussing
Yes.
of this. It's really that is the only purpose. It's the same thing that Ron Paul did, and you know, that several politicians around the world. We want one guy like that.
Yes.
We have no one like that in parliament,
Yes.
to my knowledge, at
Yes.
the moment. Yeah, who actually just stands up and says,
Yeah, no, we
these are
really-
the unintended consequences. It's all cute ideas, not
Right, he's just printing his notes.
Okay. So, are you open to talk about making that happen?
Yeah.
Let's draw up a list, let's work it, and let's talk to people, and let's get there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Over here. So I think the biggest problem actually is that libertarians are individuals and we are uncompromising in our position on freedom.
Yes.
So when we debate these
Okay, please bear with me. I haven't actually prepared anything. Between being kept up by Charles and Andrew last night, polishing off every last bottle of red wine, and then Stefan and Elna keeping me up with tequilas till 2 in the morning, and I didn't know if there would be time for me to cover anything about the Cape Party. But I have had quite a lot of questions over the weekend about us, who we are, what we stand for. So yeah, thank you very much, Charles, for giving me some of your time. And I'll tell you a bit about us. To start off though, I want to get off the back on the Libertarian Party. Thank you for your words last night. What Charles said is that we should form a, we should basically band together in the next national elections. And if there's a possibility to pull our votes together, I know currently the way it's structured you can't do that, but if we can push in that direction. The bottom line is that there's a lot of synchronicity between the Cape Party and the Libertarian Party. Our tactics are a little bit different. I basically okay, I'll get into that point later. But you mentioned something, Skulk, about being able to access quite a lot of voters, and the Cape Party is not going to contest national elections. We're only going to contest municipal elections and provincial elections in the Western Cape and the Northern Cape, and in the municipalities which outline that area. So any resources that the Cape Party has and supporters we have, I will certainly be suggesting that whatever we can put towards helping the Libertarian Party in a national election, it would be great to pool our resources together for maybe you guys can help us out in municipal and provincial elections. So thank you again, Charles. Okay, the Cape Party. So I founded the Cape Party in 2007 for a number of reasons. Being a libertarian is a strong one. And what we stand for is basically pushing for greater autonomy for the Cape region. Without going into too much detail, to most people I say just the Western Cape. But because of the constitutional stipulation of where self-determination can be applied, it's a territorial entity in which a people share a common cultural and linguistic heritage. In this entire area, people share a common cultural and linguistic heritage. And I'll go into the history as to why that is. And the ANC and both the DA, they don't talk about it, quite the contrary. They subvert the facts and try to brainwash us to their new form of history. So going back a few hundred years, this is the distribution of the Khoisan, going all the way up to North Africa. Probable distribution based to some extent on oral history at the end of the 17th century. So that's Khoisan. Sorry, yeah, that's Khoisan. Yeah. The Bantu migration then took place, pushing the Khoisan southward. Go back. There we go. Yeah, pushing the Khoisan southward, and in 1652, Jan van Riebeeck arrived, and you had the beginning where there was intermingling with the local Khoisans and the Dutch settlers, and that was the beginning of your coloured population. The language Afrikaans was formed. You had slaves from Madagascar, from Indonesia, and this was the seeds of the rich culture of what we have in the Cape today. This yellow is considered Indo-European languages, which is basically English and Afrikaans, Indo-European roots. Niger Congo, basically Bantu languages, different culture, different heritage, different history. So you can see that Bantu migration took place through up to the Fish River, which was the first contact between the Boers and the downward moving causes who were on the front lines there. They had been pushed down by the Zulus before them, and the ANC likes to talk about how bad the apartheid era was, and we certainly don't want to make any excuses for that. However, when it comes to the amount of black lives that have been lost, Shaka Zulu in the 1800s, I couldn't find the exact number, but I've heard over 1 million in some cases, and this is what brought or pushed the Khoisan group down into what we're calling the Cape Republic, the Cape of Good Hope. Here is a closer map on the distribution of this cultural linguistic heritage. As you can see, this basically, the map draws itself. The people within this region have a history going back right through to the Khoisan.
Sorry, can you explain what the difference is? The dark blue, 100% of the people speak.
Basically, what percentage of these people in the region speak an Indo-European language as a first language, either Afrikaans
First
or
language.
yeah. So Afrikaans, if Afrikaans or English is your home language, then that would be blue. And you can see it, the map draws itself.
Where's Orania on that map? Sorry.
Orania would be
The orange.
Just inside.
Your
The Free
point.
State, see the Free State there? The Free State?
yeah.
Yeah, down.
But lower,
Down.
on the
At the
point,
tent.
just below the
Bit
point.
more to the right. There, okay.
That will be the
Okay.
river, hey?
Yeah.
Great. So this is where the capital will be.
They want to be home.
No, I'm sure they don't.
Will the Cape Party leave Orania for self-determination?
Absolutely. I think we can take a page out of their book. This is a breakdown of the municipal elections. Okay, so this is quite interesting. When people vote, how do they vote? Well, the language, the culture, the history, it manifests itself when it comes to elections. And if you recall the map before, Indo-European speakers, they vote for the DA or at least those who do vote for ANC, like this would be light green. It's far less majority than you see in the rest of the country. This is another map of it. Again, you see this is fundamentally the fabric of this culture is fundamentally different to what you get across that southern border. This I find hilarious. I mean, absolutely, it's as if Mother Nature knows that down here in the Cape we're different. We've got different vegetation in this entire area. You can see that line is almost drawn as you do with the cultures. Based upon, the famous and
People can't get away from their roots.
when I saw this map, I could only laugh. It's crazy how many things just connect together.
Well, I suppose that also that there is some explanation to why maybe the other groups actually only went up to that natural.
Sure, the Khoisan were nomadic people. They lived in arid environments. They hunted. They would move around over long periods of time. Whereas the Bantus were more concentrated culture. So absolutely, there would be cultural reasons for that. So this is the area that we're calling the Cape Republic for obvious reasons. I find the map of South Africa telling in itself. I mean, Lesotho and Swaziland, independent countries, 1966 and 68 was when they returned to freedom.
Where does the Fish River lie there?
The Fish River is Port Elizabeth is there. Somewhere it's pretty close to that
The border there.
Pretty close to that border.
Yeah.
You're looking for independence for not just the Western Cape, but the Eastern and Northern Cape will be part of it too.
Small part of it.
It's okay. Our ambitions, basically, where does the road come to an end? This is where the road comes to an end. What would I like to? I'd be very happy, but what drives this is what we spoke about a bit earlier, culture, one of the first speeches we got, and then a few people spoke about here in Orania, the 235. I'll get to the legal requirements just now, but the language, the linguistic history, the common cultural linguistic heritage is what draws this map. And we'll basically take anything we can in this entire area. But because politics should not impose onto people their belief, that it should be organic from the ground, which is why homogeneous countries work well, and where you have many different ethnic groups, religious groups, cultural groups living in one country. It's a very, very dangerous thing. Despite what we get brainwashed within the media, saying, oh, we must be proud of our cultural diversity, you need to be very sensitive, very careful, and very respectful when you have a diverse country like ours. The only way a country can work when you've got such diverse cultures is to respect each one. And this is what Switzerland has done phenomenally. People think Switzerland is one country. It's not. There's 22 individual countries. It's made up of 22 cantons, and in each canton they're either German, French, Italian, or Romance speaking. And Romance. And these different ethnic groups, these different language groups, these different cultural groups live together side by side without firing one single bullet through World War I and World War II, where Germany and Italy and France were all at each other's throats. To think that Switzerland managed to make it through those wars completely neutrally, completely peacefully. And the only way they could do that is, and this reason why I raised the point earlier about, is democracy good or is it bad? It's not so straightforward. What they have is they have direct democracy. So they've localized political decision making to such a small level that cantons virtually have veto power over every decision making process within the area that they live in, much like Orania. And that is the only way that you can have so many different cultural groups living in one country. And their constitution respects everyone. I think there's even a provision that you need to have a French speaker, an Italian speaker, a German speaker represented in the government. So they make efforts to respect everyone. And that's not the case in South Africa. It hasn't been the case since 1910. And that's the problem. So here at the Cape Party, do we point fingers at the ANC? Yes, we do, because they're the current puppet. They're the current face of the puppet. But I've often said this before. I blame the ANC regime just as much as I blame the apartheid regime, just as much as I blame the British Empire that forced this upon us in 1910. The system itself lends itself to centralized, the centralization of power, where one cultural group takes over those levers of power and uses it to oppress others. The British did it, the Afrikaners did it, and now the ANC is doing it. So it's the system that needs to change. This is never going to end. It doesn't matter. The new leaders will do the exact same thing. The system creates it. Is it possible? Can the Cape become an independent country? We absolutely can. International law, United Nations, African Union, and even here in South Africa. Here's just some of them. I'm not going to take too long to go through it. You can, in your own time, if you're interested, go do some research on this. The self-determination is a very strong pillar.
Is South Africa signatory to these particular parts of the United States?
Yes, we are.
So we have a right under United Nations treaties to secede?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That's very interesting.
And many countries are in the process of doing it. Catalan, Sudan did it a few years ago. It's happening. And the world's moving in this direction.
USSR, Yugoslavia.
Absolutely. Okay, so
yes.
I don't know if you want me to read this, I don't know, but no. Okay. Basically, the entrapped group may resist this and may seek to restore its pre-colonial sovereignty. This from Karen Parker at the UN Geneva Conference in 2000. Okay, has it happened before? Absolutely. Russia, the Soviet Union broke up into, was it 15 different countries? Former Yugoslavia, 7 different countries. Czechoslovakia, 2 different countries. Sudan a few years ago. This is quite an interesting one because we can draw a lot of parallels with our situation here in South Africa, where down in the south you've got African animists, and in the north you've got devoutly Muslim communities, and it just doesn't work when you've got 2 different cultures being forced to live under a centralized political system. These people were not being respected by these people. and the United Nations got involved, and the elections were held, and I think the number was something like 98% and in favour of independence. So it was a landslide. So yes, it does happen. Scotland, Catalan, Greece from the EU, Quebec from Canada, Northern Italy, Flanders in Belgium. Orania is another example of people taking the determination of their own communities into their own hands. Do we have the infrastructure? Are we economically strong enough to go at it alone? I find this argument so redundant. I mean, you often get it. Is Cape independence possible? Would you be able to survive without the gold of the North? It's really a redundant question of whether a country is viable. An example of this is how much taxes that we pay here in the Western Cape. We are net tax losers. So of the tax we produce, 42% of that gets taken over. We are basically subsidizing the rest of the country. If South Africa functions as a viable country, then the Cape is even more viable as a country. So it's a redundant question. So this I'm just going to show you a few things on how good we are compared to the rest of the country.
Are you then saying you wouldn't lower taxes in the new Cape State?
I'm saying more than that. Actually, one of my statements in the last elections, we basically assured people that what we could do because of conditional grants. It's another sneaky one. We could basically cut current taxes in half and at the same time double services. So it's a large statement, but I'll tell you why that's the case.
So the rest of the country has a big incentive not to let you do it.
That's exactly what there'll be graphics later on, you'll see this.
Yes, there is an incentive. There's an incentive for Greece to stay within the EU. There's an incentive for the Muslims to hold on to Southern Sudan. There's an incentive for Britain to keep Scotland, part of them. But when the majority of people finally get the spine, finally get the backbone to stand up for themselves and say, we're sick and tired of this, there's nothing they can do about it. Because if they were to take military action or do any other action against it, they would be revealed for what they are, which is a fascist centralized state. And they can't be seen to be that.
Misunderstand the slide, you're saying 48% of the tax money of the Western Cape takes taken away from it.
No. So this is our employment rate. So Western Cape, Gauteng, and as it goes down. Population.
Sorry. Can you go back?
We normally are told unemployment rate. So this is
So what you're saying is that half of the Western Cape are unemployed.
48% of the employment in South Africa.
No, 48% people are employed.
That's the average.
So you're saying the Eastern Cape 80% are unemployed?
Yes.
That's
No,
not right, yeah.
20, well...
Does this include like children and retired people there?
Is this the unemployment rate?
No, this is the employment rate.
But South Africa doesn't have 33 employment. There's 33 unemployment.
This is the whole population.
But this is a funny graph, this one.
It makes no sense because
Okay, I got it off your USB stick, so...
Send it.
He must explain.
Just, all right.
just explain it.
He doesn't know what he knows.
That's true. Don't worry, there's a part of your brain that's already making this all employment.
He's having trouble.
Unemployed or stupid.
Well, basically, you're saying South Africa has 67 unemployed.
It was a nice
Exactly.
colourful slide. Just go to the next one.
Nice colours, yeah.
Okay, well,
Might be wrong.
my father's taking the heat for that. So anyway, he'll have to back that up. He'll have to back that up at some point. The point being is the Western Cape performs far better than the rest of South Africa.
Okay, this one I can explain. Yeah. Population age 20 with no education. In the Cape, it's only 5.7%, and the rest is worse. You go through, maybe the others will make more sense.
Okay, households with telephone and dwelling or a cell phone, Western Cape 63%. Households living in formal housing, Northern Cape and Western Cape 80 and 78%. Households cooking with electricity, Western Cape 78%. So our economy, our infrastructure is there. It's a redundant question whether we would be viable as an independent country. We certainly would be. To leave. We're not really being welcomed. It's not the Rainbow Nation we were promised in 1994. So, do we want to remain part of South Africa? And have we had much political choice to date? When you vote for the ANC or the DA, are we actually getting different policies? Or are they really just two political parties with the same policies, socialist, heavy taxation, centralized political parties, and the Cape Party's view, and I think anyone's view is that black economic empowerment is racism, is discrimination, and both these political parties are in favor of it. So there really isn't much political choice when it comes to the current South African political landscape. There they are, getting on very well together. So what has the DA done for the Western Cape, or Cape Town in this instance? Well, they've done a lot worse than the ANC as far as taxation is concerned. The ANC was in control of Cape Town up until 2005, 2006. The DA took over 2006, 2007. And you'll see what happened to our taxes. Our taxes went up by almost 600%.
Which are these property rates or what?
Yeah, that's included in.
Not income tax.
This is the total amount the DA takes you from all the different scams. You know, including they take a cut of the electricity. You know, Eskom has some. Then they add on top of that. Then their property rates. What you'll see on the left is the total. That's 6 billion on the left at the very top there. This is the take from everything. The little red line down there below, that is the inflation rate. You see, we're getting ripped apart. Absolutely.
What you're saying, the taxes went up 600%.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on where you start. So you start about a billion, and then you're at 6, and you see how it should be. You know, the inflation rate going up. So it's insane. Absolutely insane. What?
Yeah, this was from the last elections. We haven't got the up-to-date data. So this is up until 2009. But it shows you the mindset of the DA compared to the ANC.
Wow.
They are ruthless taxes.
Sorry, you just have to, maybe another presentation, back that up a bit more because it looks incredulous.
Yeah. That's amazing.
I'm not saying it's not true, I'm just saying it looks incredulous.
That could only be done through property rate increases. They have no other taxing power.
No, that's my point. The property rates have not increased 600%. So,
or it could be done by provincial growth.
This is, you can look this up. This is what the DA says. We've got 6 billion to spend. It only comes from tax.
But there may be more properties. There may
be more properties. There may be, and on top of it, the electricity has gone. The electricity has gone through the roof. We've all blamed Eskom, but it turns out what they don't tell you, we can't find out how much more they add on to your electricity rate here. You know, they're taking a cut from this thing.
Well, it happens everywhere.
All this is.
Johannesburg also.
Right, but everyone can do it themselves, you see. They won't have the same rate as we do here in the Cape. You have to understand that.
Okay, so the DA,
basics, we can check the fact that
yeah.
The DA likes to tax.
So just go back to that slide. At the bottom it says here, oh, it's their budget, okay, but that includes their grant from the fiscus.
Yeah.
So it's the total budget, that's not their tax.
I do want to say that in that same period, I was working for National Treasury. I was working for National Treasury in that same period. We had not a balanced budget, but we were running like a worldwide a reasonable deficit. After they saw, I'm assuming this is what they did, after they saw the Americans printing a shitload of money out of nothing when they were in trouble, it was literally as if they just went, well, we can deficit spend like there is no tomorrow. That might really explain the actual spike at that specific point in time, though, and that would have been budgets that would have trickled down to municipal level.
They very well might be the
What I'm
case.
saying is the footnote at the bottom says it's the budget, not the tax.
Okay, well anyway, so this data you can essentially cross-reference and
A government has no money of their own. Essentially, this came from us one way or the other.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it came from the, you'll see when it was broken down how much we go out and how much comes in again in the next slide, I think.
okay, so taxpayers, tax leaders.
No, go back. This is very
Spend
important.
a lot of time on this, on what you know.
Okay, so where is the money coming from? Here's the Western Cape and the Northern Cape, areas which we believe are part of the Cape Republic. Here's Gauteng. So for every 100 Rand that the province pays in taxes, how much do they get back? The Northern Cape breaks even. The Northwest gets 3 Rand extra, the Free State 12 Rand extra, Mpumalanga 16 Rand, KwaZulu-Natal gets 57 Rand extra, Limpopo 90 Rand extra, the Eastern Cape 91 Rand extra. Compared to the Western Cape and Gauteng, where 42% of our taxes get stolen and 52% of Gauteng's taxes are never returned to the province as a whole. However, this doesn't give
It does that because they're not the same size.
this doesn't give detail as to the actual cities themselves.
It's much bigger.
Sorry, the questions.
And the risk combined. So that's it.
Okay, so which cities are actually getting all the money? East London 725 in comparison, Port Elizabeth 599, Joburg 528, so that was in Gauteng, Cape Town in the Western Cape. Johannesburg is getting a lot more money back than we're getting in Cape Town. We've been robbed.
Yeah, if you included Pretoria and Vereeniging, they must comparatively be getting less. Then.
Well, all I care about is Cape Town. We're being robbed. So move down. Once we get the Cape independent, we'll sort this issue out. The point is how Cape Town is being robbed and the Western Cape is being robbed, and there's an attack against the majority culture of the Cape, and that ties in with an economic attack against us. And so that's the congruency of our argument. So yeah, I can't really comment for Johannesburg or Pretoria. So yeah, in the Western Cape, for each 100 rand we pay in taxes. You saw that. So 42% of that gets removed from the Western Cape. Of the 58% we do get back, 34% of it is spent on conditional grants. This was in 2011, so I'll have to recheck what the current Division of Revenue Act is, but I can't imagine it would have been any better than this. But this is pretty much as bad as it gets. So 34% goes to the conditional grant. So what a conditional grant is basically it's an allocation to the province that gets spent according to the central government's mandate. So we know that the ANC is not going to be spending that money on the people of the Cape. They're rather going to be spending that on ways to improve their voting bloc. And primarily where we've seen that go is into building houses for migrants who come from the Eastern Cape.
So are you anti-migrant?
No, I'm not anti-migrant.
But your slide looks like you're anti-migrant.
That depends on the migrant.
Okay. What migrants don't you like? The Muslim ones or which ones?
No. The Cape Republic would be a meritocracy. And we would have immigration by invitation. So if you're going to come into our country and you're going to provide services or provide to the economy, be a good law-abiding citizen, you don't have a criminal record, then you're welcome.
So the answer, you would have immigration control?
Yes.
Like Australia, like anywhere.
No, just a question. Just a question. Maybe I like it.
Okay, so once again, the DA and the ANC's policies are closely aligned.
No, that is scary.
That is quite scary.
Please get rid of that slide, I'm going to be sick. Just before dinner, it's not right.
Okay, so the Cape, how special are we? Well, I think we're pretty special, especially if you look at other countries around the world. Places that went independent or were at least established or founded.
Discovered? You mean the people living there didn't know it was there?
No, what I'm saying is, for example, here in the Cape, like the Khoisan were here far before 1652. But if you look at the genetics of the coloured population today, they are largely Khoisan. And interestingly enough, many
Sorry, I'll be a
Afrikaners...
spin doctor for you. You can just say when the first European settlers arrived and everybody's happy.
Yeah, so many of the Afrikaners also have Khoisan blood in them. So it really is a mixed culture that Afrikaans was formed with Dutch as a base, but it was also influenced by Malay, Indonesian culture, English culture. So that began in 1652. The Declaration of Independence in America was 1776. Australia founded in 1788. New Zealand in 1840. So if any of these places have got a right to be recognized as countries by the world, then we've got many hundreds of years on some of these countries. So we are a country, we were a country since 1652. The British Empire imposed on us in 1910 a terrible colonial policy to draw artificial lines across ethnic groups, across cultural groups. The levers of power we used to oppress minorities is what the British did up until 48, is what the apartheid regime did up until 1994, what the ANC is doing up until today. If we want to solve this problem, we have to break down the centralized system and decentralize into local communities. That's why Switzerland works so well. If we get independent, we're going to replicate the direct democracy of Switzerland and the economic freedoms of Singapore and Hong Kong. With those two policies together, the Cape Republic could be one of the best countries in the world.
Woo.
Yes, exactly.
Can we ask questions?
Are you going to... I want to be number 4.
Okay.
I see a lot of anchor imagery in your logo.
Yeah, you know, literally I made the logo myself 10 years ago. You know, perhaps my artistic skills weren't that great back then. They still aren't too good. I liked the image. I'll tell you what my thoughts were behind it. The anchor is a strong image. It's security, stability. There's obviously that voyaging history from the 1652 settlers. The 4 stars, what I like about that is there's only one geographical location on Earth that has a constellation in the sky that is represented. And that is Table Mountain. It's called Mons Mensa, and it's a formation of 4 stars. And I just like the concept. I think 4 stars, Mons Mensa, the only place on Earth that's represented in the stars. So yeah, that's what the 4 stars stand for.
Okay, Dougie?
Surely, if you do get independence, then Helen Zuma and her people will be the ones actually running the Cape.
Sorry, Helen Zilla and Zuma would be the one.
No, not Zuma, Helen Zilla.
Sure, absolutely. I would hope that...
She might not like that photo you did.
No, she probably won't like it, but I don't like her policies, and I hope that the voters wouldn't vote for someone like that, because if people don't know what they're voting for, they're voting against the ANC. The reason they vote for the DA is because, unless we'll be honest, how South African politics works. It's an ethnic census. You can see that first map I showed you about the breakdown of South Africa. All the green is ANC, all the blue is DA. I didn't have on there, there's another map with red for IFP. You'll see KwaZulu-Natal is completely, it's virtually completely red because they vote on tribal lines. They vote for the Zulu chief. And so yeah, here in the Western Cape, people vote for the DA because they see it as at least not being the ANC, as an alternative to the ANC. People aren't specifically happy with the DA. I haven't spoken to many people who say, oh geez, we love the DA. They vote for them because it's at least going to keep the ANC out. But if you look at their policies, they're a socialist, tax and spend, terrible party.
Charles?
I'm number 4.
All right then, Ron.
Effectively, what you're wanting to do is have a very large Orania type state.
No, that's
said
incorrect.
It's using section 235, which is recognizing cultural, language, heritage.
Yeah, exactly. But here in Orania, I deeply respect what they've done. But being a libertarian, I also believe that people can have different cultures. If there's going to be a Muslim Orania, I would welcome that too. And I don't think that Muslims would necessarily want to come and live here in Orania, and it's their right. And just they should have the right to also tell people from Orania who want to move to their Muslim area that, well, you probably wouldn't be comfortable here. So we respectfully would like you to, you would be happier in a Christian environment than in a Muslim environment. So people have the right to determine their culture and their future.
Madam Chair, I haven't asked my question.
Charles?
I was just.
Well, you
about
mustn't
to
do that. Lots of people that want to ask a
Well,
question.
if I haven't answered, I'll try to do better.
I actually haven't asked my question.
You haven't asked your question. I thought you said
you did. Is it Orania?
Ask it, Ron.
Okay. The question is this: there are divergent, hugely divergent cultures, languages, religions within the Cape Province, despite the assertion that it's an Indo-English Afrikaans language state. You propose splitting it up into many cantons,
Yes.
and for concentrations of people to migrate to those cantons if they so wish.
If they so wish. The Constitution has to be a very strong libertarian constitution. No one can be discriminated against. No one can be oppressed by anyone else. This is going to be a foundation, a bedrock of the Cape Republic. However, within that framework, you can have regions which will have the freedom to fine-tune their cantons, so to speak.
Charles?
I must admit, I never ever saw the Cape as a different country, so it's been quite insightful, and it redefined a very brief interaction that I had with Mr. Mandela. Met him in 1992. He said, "Are you an expatriate, sir?" I said, "No. Your forefathers and my forefathers met at the Fish River, and we started to steal one another's cattle, and we started shooting at one another. You better put a stop to it." So we had a little kind of giggle and laugh discussion and so on, and in the end he laughed and he said that's exactly what he's going to be doing. But that discussion now, a new color has gone. That's why I asked you the question, where's the living Fish River here? Because this rewriting of the history, he didn't dispute at that point the fact that we met there. And yeah.
The history is indisputable.
Yeah,
in spite of some of the things you read in the newspapers there, it's just boggling.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of historical evidence on history of South Africa is, I don't even know why there's debate. So yeah, everyone agrees on the facts, more or less. And yeah, to go a bit further, I do think that colonialism was a terrible, terrible thing for Africa, for different reasons though. Primarily what the European settlers did, or the Dutch East India Company and various British Empire, various colonial empires, is they cut artificial boundaries. They pretty much, the Queen just sat there, took a map of Africa with a ruler, just drew lines, regardless of the religions, the cultures, the ethnicities. And this is why we've got a situation like Rwanda with Hutus and Tutsis. And
India is the best example. Yeah. And they physically took ruler and said, "Jukes," and we saw the chaos that
absolutely.
I don't think it was the Queen though.
No.
I was wondering how you get a referendum where the boundaries haven't yet been determined. So I mean, surely when people do want to succeed, there has to be some sort of referendum, like in Scotland or all of these places. So you'd have to obviously have a policy like this, maybe it's the Western Cape area, and then ask for it to succeed, and then invite other people to have referendums in other neighbourhoods to petition to become part of the boundary. I'm not quite sure how you go about getting it there.
May I answer that? Sure. These boundaries are municipal boundaries.
Yeah.
This map appeared from the census.
Yeah.
There are 62 continuous municipalities here. Each and every one has a majority of Afrikaans or English speakers. So you can have a referendum by municipality, it would come out very much like this.
Right, but now how would you organise a succession referendum to poll the people within this area to see if they want to become an independent republic? Because I think that's the whole notion of self-determination. The majority would have to want to do it and vote for it.
Yes.
How would one organise getting a referendum like that done? Say next year or in 5 years.
Okay, well this is why we started a political party. And when we applied to the IEC, we gave our constitution, which clearly states what our intentions are. I was pretty naive at that point. I thought if they would register us, the argument is so compelling that all we needed to do was get on the ballot sheet and tell people what our issue was, and they go, goodness me, make the Cape an independent country. Of course. I was naive. Money controls politics, and we saw the DA and the ANC come into Mitchell's plan, buses, t-shirts, food packages, and that's what wins elections. So anyway, The point being is that if we can get one foot in the door, if we can get a seat in council, a seat in Stellenbosch, a seat in some of these districts out here, 2 seats, 5 seats, 10 seats, 15 seats, build and build, and then with that platform, we gain credibility, we gain a bigger audience, a bigger mouthpiece to spread our agenda, our issues, and just like Scotland has taken many years to get there, Catalan has taken many years to get there. It would be a progression until we get to the point that if we had what the DA has right now, we could call a referendum and declare the Cape an independent country. The DA has the power, they've got the mandate from the voters, if they wanted to push in that direction.
You'd have to control each magistrate.
Okay, we're moving on now. We're not having a debate. Skulk?
Okay, just out of interest, what ethnicity are you?
Well, it's I guess that's a good question. My ethnicity is Libertarian.
Okay, but like you're making this argument based on ethnicity predominantly.
No. I'm basing it on the legal criteria for which a region will be justified to declare independence by the United Nations or the South African Constitution. We've got to play within the rules of the game. The rules of the game say you need to speak a common language within a territorial entity, and then we'll give you self-determination. I'm a libertarian. I believe in freedom of the individual, regardless of ethnicity or religion.
So you're showing boring us.
You're European.
Yeah, so I mean, my father's American, my mother's Scandinavian, so that would be my genetic blood. I was born in Kenya, and I lived in Cape Town since I was 3 years old. So that's my discussion on culture before.
Just move. He asked what you are, we've heard that. Sorry.
Cool. There isn't got time for politicians.
Sorry?
There isn't got time for politicians.
Bobby, it's you now.
There's one more point.
Well, let Tim make his point, and then we're going to I've got you down.
It turns out that there are a whole lot of other parties, small parties, we've spoken to them, who are going to have this plank, a referendum plank. There's 2 or 3 colored parties straight away. We've only spoken, there's 2 Muslim parties who are going to do it. So part of their plank is going to be that we're going to go with the Cape Party. We're Muslim, but we think this is a great idea. I've hardly met anyone. You get a standard answer. Yes, this is a fantastic idea, but it will never happen. It will never happen, but they all like it. And this is something, I think, if you get a groundswell, all the people will be saying, well, we like the idea, but it will never happen. They say, ooh, hey, wait a minute, maybe it will. And the DA has changed fundamentally. This is going to be a very different election for them. They're looking to the rest of South Africa to win.
You're talking about the municipal elections.
I'm talking about the municipal elections. They're going to be next May. Suddenly, it could well be up for grabs. They've made a very daring thing here. And who knows how it's going to turn out.
Right, I just want to make a couple of comments, if you don't mind. First, what Ron asked with regards to Section 235 and so on. If I understand it correctly, what the Cape Republic would actually be is these cantons, and Orania could be one canton. And you could have various other cultural cantons, and then you might have multicultural cantons, or whatever the case may be, and it would be a puzzle of all this. So that's how I understand the Cape Republic's Oranian canton, exactly as we are, could possibly fit in there. The other thing is, from the various speeches I've heard, is especially with Trevor, with Libertarian, we had the conversation earlier, and with Charles, with the Libertarian Party, what boggles my mind slightly, we've talked about this to some extent, is the focus on party politics. The emphasis on getting that one seat in Parliament to spread the message. From my view, the South African Institute of Racial Relations, the Free Market Foundation, is spreading the message very effectively. They are driving cases. So what one member of Parliament would actually do in excess of that is something that, to a certain extent, I don't really grasp. Well, she's got the
Ron Paul.
well, how effective are they now?
Very. I'm a libertarian because of Ron Paul. Lots of us here are libertarians because of guys like
Yeah, but within the politics of America, I mean, Rand Paul is nowhere near the top. So the issue is, okay, so you've converted people to a certain idea, but how do you bring it to ground? How do you build actually that? So coming to Trevor's issue or presentation on Libertarian, the way from how I experience Orania and how we've done it, my question would be, don't you guys think if you could replicate, start at local communities where the state is withdrawing, leaving a vacuum, and you can actually start developments? You don't have the bottlenecks that like we do, where we want Afrikaner labor. So there can be actual viable business models to actually start these type of communities.
Yes.
And actually replicate that all over the area and link that to the party and the goal. So where they've got the pain, you actually give them the solution and you link it to the idea.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're just talking in the wind and the idea. So just a couple of comments. Obviously, I'm not going to be contested, but that's
a lovely idea. It's a lovely idea.
Okay, Trevor?
I've said for many years, in fact, that there's a historic inevitability to the likelihood that the Cape will, in fact, secede from South Africa. I believe it's as inevitable as the Arab Spring was, and is as likely to be about as successful as the Arab Spring was. And so some words of caution is, I totally agree with Carvey. Don't go for the grand prize. You're not going to beat the DA. You're going to become just an irritation, and you might get in the odd ANC seat as a tiny little Cape party taking on the behemoth of the DA. I didn't have this idea until Carvey gave it a couple of seconds ago. I think your strategy would be far better is to nibble away at the edges, create little states within the Cape where you successfully implement an independence policy. Let's put it that way.
Is that possible? Can you actually take less than a province?
Far away from the city centres. You don't want to start with Cape Town, you want to start with Pofadder or somewhere like that. And we already have a good precedent for that. There's all sorts of municipalities all over South Africa at the moment which have declared effective UDI from the ANC. Now I would suggest that as a strategy rather than taking on the giant, try and eat away at his feet. But do be aware that the end point for all of this is a civil war in South Africa.
No,
Okay,
I don't.
stop.
Okay. Am I allowed to answer these questions? Okay, sorry.
Well, it wasn't a question, it was a speech.
Well, he said
civil war.
Could I have your comment on my speech?
No. You can answer, yes, you can answer, you can comment.
No, it's not going to be civil war. As I said before, when the majority of people vote for their freedom, self-determination, there's very little the government can do in the face of that. From a military point of view, the South African Army was sent into Lesotho and Zimbabwe, I think, as well, and I think within 24 hours they all disbanded. So I don't think that any military intervention in Cape Independence is...
Egypt, Libya, Tripoli.
Totally different situations.
Perhaps.
Yes, Scott?
Just on holding a referendum, the idea that I had, if you had to try and buy a small amount of land from a place like Namibia that had an enormous, Namibia has few enough people to actually, if you get a consortium of people who just wanted a production base and you wanted to set up a libertarian, I wouldn't hold a referendum to actually try and secede the thing. Rather make a financial offer and say how many of these people would actually be willing to accept this offer. Or hold a poll to something to the effect of, would you secede the Cape if it meant 50% of the taxes you pay currently? Something to that effect, and rather get the viral thing out there where the people don't have to commit to the thing. There's no way. There's so many, that whole joke about if voting changed anything, it would be illegal. That's not as untrue as it sounds. It is largely illegal. Because it would maybe once or twice change something. And think about something like that. Is my suggestion for strategy would be far more just to ask that question out of curiosity, make the argument, and specifically show the guy maybe the top 2 benefits. You know, and make that rather the driver than to try and get a referendum off the base. And once the polling shows you'll win the referendum, then basically resort to the referendum.
Yeah, I don't think any of these suggestions are either or. I think in order to maintain our legitimacy, we have to contest elections and we have to be represented in government as best that we can, even if that's one seat in the city council. So yeah, all of these are great suggestions. Added to the artillery.
So we kind of have to do. I have a quick objection. You just asked my political But I was going to say, well, you've got a lot of anecdotal stuff that they support for secession. And on the other hand, you don't actually have a referendum, but you should have a poll, like some sort of randomized polling, and not necessarily the conditional questions, is it just the basic, you know, are you in favour of secession or not?
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. We actually had a Cape Party meeting.
You can add some conditional questions, but just that basic one.
Yeah, we had a Cape Party meeting just 2 weeks ago, and one of these guys has got, sorry?
Some more comment there. One of the things is that people often don't act. They may all agree with each other, but they don't know that it's common knowledge, or that other people agree with them. They have the same position held privately. But the moment you make it like a poll, and it becomes public, and people become aware that others agree with them,
yes,
then they might think about not voting for the DA, but rather the Clip.
It's a very good point.
At the moment they say, privately they might think, yeah, it's a great idea,
yeah,
but it has no hope, so I'm going to vote DA.
That's a very good point.
You have to make the position common knowledge.
And my instinct is that the poll would be very positive, because when we speak to people about it, the overwhelming response really is, wow, what a fantastic idea, but you guys are smoking in grass, it's never going to happen, the government won't allow it, and we're worried that you're going to take votes away from the DA. Those it's the exact same answers every time. So that would address that issue definitely by giving people confidence. Wait a second, I'm not alone in this, so very good suggestion.
Ayanda?
Thanks, Jack, for the presentation. Very interesting. Naturally, for me, I'm not using this information just for the Cape. I have other interests, which you know about, I'm sure. But between the South African Constitution allowing this to happen and the United Nations, which of those two is the stronger? Because, I mean, this issue that you have is throughout the former British Empire.
Yeah.
You know, just next door where I was born, it's a huge issue. And I'm just wondering why you did give some examples, but I would think that there's much, much more of this to come. And I'm particularly interested in the United Nations because it's obviously not every constitution of the African plan that would allow for that. I mean, that is one thing they are dead against. What would you say the chances are?
Yeah, I got cut off earlier. I was answering Charles there. But the reason we've got the Cape Party is because this is where I live, this is my home, and there's injustice taking place. So it starts at home. But I would just as likely want to see a KwaZulu-Natal Independence Party, an Eastern Cape Independence Party, a Limpopo Independence Party. I think Africa needs to go through a massive overhaul on the way the countries are structured. You've got serious problems. I mean, Kenya's multiple different ethnic groups there. The Maasai's have been destroyed by the Kikuyu centralized policy. Africa's full of stories like this, and the only way you solve it is decentralized. This is the key to it all. You can have communist countries as long as they're all communist within their own individual communities. It's when the boundaries get too big that you have oppression of one against another.
Africa, yeah. So like the United Nations thing, sorry to jump in.
Yeah.
The United Nations, remember, most of that, when a country secedes, I think the big powers have to kind of vote on it.
Yes.
Britain sits there. It is the instigator of, or the start of all these problems we're talking about. And it is unlikely to be exactly for this.
Well, yeah, that's quite interesting. Fortunately, now we've got two very different global powers emerging. You've got Russia, China, India, Brazil, and then you've got the old powers, and all you need is certainly one superstate to recognize you, and you become recognized as an country, we're a long way to getting there. You asked about the United Nations Constitution. If I'm correct, the Sudanese Constitution didn't even have an allowance for self-determination. But because the conflict was so bad there, and perhaps there were oil interests that the Americans had, who knows, but whatever went on behind closed doors, it happened, and it was in the United Nations Constitution, and it was on that basis that Southern Sudan broke away from Northern Sudan. So whether it's more important to have it in the country's constitution, or whether in the African Union Constitution or the United Nations, my instinct would say that when it comes to forming a country, you need to have support from the international community or as many people as possible. So to have the United Nations back you up, I think, is exceptionally powerful. And if you go through the United Nations various constitution, various agreements that they've got clauses, they are very strong in self-determination. So the legal criteria is certainly there.
If UKIP
Okay, last question.
That wouldn't be a problem with
Chief. Sorry?
If UKIP ever win the election in the UK, the British problem would disappear.
Yeah.
Okay, Chief, this is the last question.
I just want to ask, you include Northern Cape, okay?
Yeah.
In the last election, 2014 election, I think the Northern Cape was a very big disappointment for the DA. They expected a much bigger swing anti-ANC, right, than anybody else. And I think that was because when all said and done, the Northern Cape people are very poor and the government gives them money. And it's an economic thing. So I think people are much more likely as time goes on to vote on an economic basis. There might be islands like Orania that vote ethnically or want to be ethnically pure.
Yeah.
But on the whole, their economic interest is what they're going to vote for as we go along. And I think to base it on English and Afrikaans language divisions, I don't think that's going to be as strong as economic system and economic effectiveness.
Well, your instinct is correct, because there's a professor on secession called Jason Sorens, and he's sort of the leading voice, and he defines it that the number one reason why regions secede is economic. That's the first reason, and then comes language and culture as secondary to that. So once again, what I really want, what I think we would all want, is a libertarian Cape Republic. Not even, it's 62 independent countries within this region. We've chosen to look at the cultural linguistic basis because that's how international law is structured. But it really is a channel to getting one of the first true libertarian states in the world, where we're combining the best elements of direct democracy and free economics. And there's not many countries, I don't think there's any countries in the world that exist purely on that basis. So you're right, the economic issue is very strong, and the amount that we're getting taxed certainly is a strong enough issue to carry us past the finish line.
Okay, guys, our scheduled time is up. So those that I presume the weather's still bad.
I can quickly give it a go.
So I know Leon wants to show a couple of videos. I think people who want to go, they've had enough, should go. People who want to watch, or maybe take a 5-minute break and come back. Whatever. We're not in formal session any longer. So if people want to talk about something or do something, they should make their case first. Leon? You want